started with part 2. We had a transition where some people on our campus teach it too. So they had to take off for teaching and so what I'm doing is talking about the role of reflection and critical reflection in service learning. I'll draw on some of the literature and some things from my own experience, and Julie's going to talk a little bit about what they're doing at UNO with respect to critical reflection. The literature, it's basically all coming, at least initially, from John Dewey, the philosopher of education, and the idea is that we don't learn anything from experience per se. We learn from reflecting on experience. And so I do different kinds of service learning in my classes, and if I ever shortchange reflection, that's a bad idea. I know it, but sometimes, you know, if you get under a crunch, you may find yourself doing that. And I do find that this quote from Schwartzman and Phelps is really true, that if you do the reflection, if you don't do the reflection, you can go out in a community and wind up not really addressing what's happening with the students or with the community partner, and you can wind up with reinforcing stereotypes or not addressing the actual social problem that is out there. So I'm a huge advocate of doing reflection sort of as often and as much as possible. So what I'd like you to do at your tables, and I'm not sure if everybody has some background, but you can probably figure, even if you haven't taught a service learning class, think about the ways in which you see reflection and really thinking about experience working, and then what happens when you don't do it or when you see it go wrong. So if you'll talk for a few minutes about that, and then we'll have one person from each table talk a little bit about what you see before we actually talk about some of the lessons learned.
And I know that there's personal kind of reflection, kind of how does this, impact you, and that's different about things, but I think it's almost more important that they bring in support and evidence and user experiences to then illustrate how that plays out, if it does or doesn't, right? So they kind of take a critical examination of what they're learning about theory and research and applying it to what they're observing. And then in addition to kind of their own personal reflection, right? So that's kind of what I do in my reflection. So it's an academic component, and then there's a personal component as well. But so what is difficult for me is what's great is when students do that really well, right? It's clear that they understand, so for example, I do, as a developmentalist, I do aging individuals, there's a lot of stereotypes about aging individuals and aging, just aging processes. And so I want them to show me what they've learned about that and then integrate that with their experiences actually interacting with aging individuals. And then, of course, reflect on how that impacts their personal thinking about aging for themselves and then interacting with aging individuals. So when it works well, it's amazing, right? And then there's the, they might get the intellectual piece up here, where they can do the integration through research, but then when they get to their own personal reflection, it's still full of kind of stereotypes and misconceptions, and it's still kind of their own anecdotal, and so they're not putting that together, like critically kind of unpackaging that a little bit, so that's when it doesn't go as well. So I think, yes, I think
It may not be quality just because you want it to be quality.
and they're detached, it's almost like a detached, like they totally get it, it's like, you know, that they get it from a research theory standpoint, but when it comes to their own thinking, it's like they're detached from that, and they just want to hold on to the anecdotal, and it's like, okay, but that's an opportunity for continual reflection, discussion, and learning. But sometimes, especially, and now I'm feeling this 7-week block, how are you going to get that? Because you're right, sometimes it takes time. Right, and the thing is, so in a 15, 16-week semester, we maybe can interact with individuals several times, right? In 7 weeks, I'm going to do everything to even get them in the door to interact with individuals. And then to then have them write about it, I'm going to have to really change my approach, I think, to that reflection piece and what that's going to be.
What I was taught to do in the world of education, several different kinds of training that really.
So maybe one more minute and then we'll.
And that is
versus you personally.
right. What? So what? Now what? That's one approach to answer those questions, which is really tantamount to the EIAG, the experience, and then you identify the significant parts of that experience. EIAG, yeah, the experience. So they're them being in their placement, and then when you come back from that, then you identify what are the key pieces that impact you, and to analyze why that was so. Why are those particular things the things you are remembering from this? As part of the analysis. But you can also put an academic piece side to that as well, in terms of how they analyze, and then generalize.
Right, so I'm gonna,
having experienced and learned these things, how are you going to connect that to going forward?
And in the small groups, and ask you folks to talk a little bit about some of the lessons you've learned, or it may also be questions. So maybe one person from each table. So I usually don't like to point. Okay.
So all of us have some experience with service learning, but I think a few of us have questions about how to construct the reflection. So I teach first year students and then mostly more advanced students and not really a lot in the middle. So I find that sometimes first years don't need a prompt, they just need to sort of get it out on the page, but my advanced students will have a harder time sort of constructing it. They'll see the reflection as like a burden or something they just want to get out of the way, and they won't really spend a lot of time on it unless I have some kind of construct that I'm anticipating. But we've had some success, and first year engagement has had some success with giving first year students like a list of things that we expect to see in the reflection, and then giving them like choose your own adventure as to how you accomplish this. But I just think like we don't have a perfect method yet for figuring out how to construct a reflection that's going to yield the kind of data we need to then redo this later or make sure that it was high impact, right? So it's like, and I also think first year students, sometimes and all students in general, like if you don't give them enough boundaries, you just get word vomit from like wherever they're at emotionally at the time.
Right.
And it could be totally not useful, right? It's just like they were really mad this day and it has nothing to do with the service learning. So I think if there's like anyone who's mastered this and figured out the way to construct these, that'd be super helpful. But I don't know that there's like a one size fits all or a way to ensure that it's.
Not that I know of anyway.
Yeah, right. That makes me feel a little better.
Actually,
yeah.
I would like to respond to that.
Yeah.
Coming from education and teaching, what has been used successfully for quite a while have been a couple of approaches that are very similar. I shared one at our table that goes with the acronym EIAG. the experience, you experience whatever it is you experience, and then the reflection is structured in terms of you identify what the significant pieces of that experience were, and then analyze as the A, why those particular pieces of the experience were significant. And then we also had some discussion about personal reflection versus more of an academic reflection, where you are also going to require them to back up their observations with pieces of evidence from their experience. And then the G is to generalize. Okay, so having experienced and learned what you've learned, how are you going to carry that forward? How is that going to impact other parts of your life? Another just really quick, easy way of looking at this, pretty much the same thing, is the what, no, what, so what, now what, no, let me rewind.
So what?
What? So what and now what? You know, what was significant? Well, so what? So tell me more about that. Why were those things significant? And now what? Going forward, you know, what are you going to do with that? So that's just a basic template that you could really flesh out really easily.
Yep.
That's my 2 cents.
Good 2 cents.
We talked about the necessary expectations, like at least having boundaries for what they're looking at, and to make those expectations really clear. Because when surveys happen, the students don't see the benefit from classroom knowledge to experiential knowledge. They're not, you know, why we do this. So it's making sure that that is clear. And then the other parts that we talked about was making sure that they know that this isn't them trying to appease you as the instructor or trying to
Yeah.
what you want to hear. And then Jackie, what did you say when it worked well? What was the
When
what
you
they do
just,
for you?
yeah, you come up with commonalities between you and the population you've served. So instead of thinking of how am I helping today, you also ask how did they help you today? So just to remind the students that this is a reciprocal relationship. There is a power imbalance that's perceived, but if you could kind of unpack that a little bit and remind them that we're all humans, and the people that are across the table from you may have made very similar choices to you, and circumstances might be what the difference is. It's not an us versus them.
And to your point, I do have, I found a resource I just actually shared with Jackie today, a service reflection toolkit that was developed, and it has not only how to engage students in a reflection, but it also has alternate activities that you can do that aren't just writing a reflective essay or having students participate in a discussion. And it's based on time that you have allowed. So like, I want my students to participate in an hour-long debriefing session on this activity, and here's different activities. I really like to use this and take pieces and parts of it and kind of develop different things. But we as a campus are looking at developing our own toolkits and having those for faculty to be able to pull resources from at their will whenever they need that, so that it's consistent when they go from class to class or department to department, that they're reflecting in a similar manner. The expectations are similar.
That's a good idea.
So-
What was that resource? Did you?
I can share it with the group,
Okay.
but it's through the
That's-
Northwest Service Academy,
Okay.
and AmeriCorps was involved in the development of it. It's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, and there are some other ones out there, less comprehensive, but I think more, like giving you a lot of ideas. Miami-Dade has a service learning toolkit of like, there's a short little things, you can do this differently or that differently. And then I've also shared on the Google Drive, when you edit, a couple of different ones, models out there. There's one on the what, so what, now what, and a couple of other ones, but you really have to tailor them to whichever class or whatever learning goals you want. You can't, one size doesn't necessarily fit all, as the toolkit.
Yes,
suggests.
absolutely.
Okay. You folks?
We've actually had students experience success and and presentations and publications with the reflection of, based upon, and I have to look up the reference, it is Clayton and Ash, with the articulated learning in the 3 domains, whether it's an academic, personal, and a civic. And finding it works best when you have the time, there's a small enough group, and you have the time to actually read the reflection, and then to turn around and give it. They have guiding questions as well. You can turn it around and give it back to them, ask them to go deeper, and then to be forthcoming and saying, I think you're just telling me what you think I want to hear. So that's been very successful for us, but at the same time, when you've got a class size of 40, it's difficult to ask them to write a reflection, have it be meaningful. Some are, but then you have to turn around and give some back and ask for more probing questions. In the meantime, you're still trying to move forward with the material. It just becomes a logistic nightmare.
Those are some of the real challenges of being able to do this well.
Jean,
So, yeah.
I'll just bring one more thing that was brought up here in terms of time. You know, sometimes those reflections take time to sink in with the students, but now you're in a position at this institution where the time you used to have is very much like in half, pretty much,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
And how that might impact.
It does impact in terms of long-term thinking. You get depth and richness in the sense that we're in the classroom as many hours or sometimes a bit more than we were in the past. It's just that it's fast. You know, you don't
But
have to.
sometimes the personal impact takes time. And it's kind of interacting with your community partners multiple times in different settings over time. And now I'm concerned, you know, so if you're working with aging individuals and you get them one time versus an entire semester where you've had many opportunities to interact with them. That,
Yeah,
you know, I mean,
right.
how is that? So yes, there might be opportunities to kind of
I
delve
get you,
into
Stephanie.
the research, right, and to think about things in that way, kind of the critical thinking piece, but it's that personal piece that might take a little more time. It's not that it's not going to happen.
Well, and I think a lot of it depends on some of the things that I'll be talking about, some of the things that people talk about with respect to what makes quote unquote good reflection.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think that you pointed to is that I never thought the semester was quite long enough. And so now we've got it halfway in terms of working in the community. And I think we probably as an institution need to build some ways that things are happening across the blocks, or that we're scaffolding
Yes.
one thing with another.
Or even other classes, like
Exactly,
if I
that's-
know
yeah.
that
To partner.
first year students are doing this, then can we continue that in another class that's geared for,
And that will, I think that's gonna take some really hard strategic thinking. Lisa?
One of the things that we found to be interesting with the first years, they had one day to do a project. But one of the things that was really high impact for them, based on their reflections, and then they did a personal written reflection, but then they also did a group reflection and created a PowerPoint to share and synthesize their learning. And one of the things that we found was that being able to self-select their project was really important. So we set up a plethora of opportunities in a particular time period, and then over the course of, they could choose from a Friday to Friday evening, and then all day Saturday, but it was different times and different lengths and different kinds of projects, and we had a descriptor for each one, and who does it support and how does it serve the community, and if you are interested in these kinds of things, you might be interested in this project. And we gave them time to really thoughtfully consider what they might select and why. I mean, like, that was a really important piece, I think. And so then they were able to identify what it was they particularly wanted to learn from. in that experience, and then we worked with our community partners and got them out into those experiences, and then they did the reflections and et cetera. But we found it to be incredibly high impact in a very short amount of time, and they did get, for the most part, as we're talking about their writing that they did, their written reflection, that they were able to get to the point of recognizing how it was a mutually beneficial experience. You know, it was back and forth. But the other thing that we added to that is several of those projects are becoming first-year specific long-term projects. So the project we did with Crossroads, for example, has now been through our second phase, and it's transferring into a long-term project with our Restore project, so that that same group of students is going to move through the whole year and maybe through their 4 years at the college in this work and getting deeper and deeper into it all the time. It's not all of them. Obviously, this is a dozen students, but we're practicing, we're like trying it out. What does it look like if they self-select and then they help grow that service opportunity to be more deeply embedded in their work as a student? So we found that to be really, really powerful if we can just multiply that to 350 students. That,
Well, there wasn't, I read all of the reflections. It was a lot, but there was not a single student who didn't say they got something out of it, and they were brutally honest about lots of other things, so I don't think they would have held back if they really thought that it was like, if we were full of it.
right.
So yeah, overall I think it was good, but thinking about the toolkit and like other methods for responding, I think we would have had a lot more success, because the writing was an impediment to some students, right? Like, so if you're not a great writer and it makes you nervous, you're not gonna have the kind of reflection and response that.
Right, which is why we did the slideshow too.
Right.
They did the Google Slides with visual images and quotes and music and some other element, I can't remember.
Interpretive dance.
Interpretive dance, yeah. They could have if they wanted to. But it had those other opportunities for them to show what they had learned in multiple forms. We actually used a toolkit you provided.
Yeah,
They came up with that.
that's a Miami Dade one. I can send that link to people if you are already familiar with it. So to talk a little bit, as we've been saying, there are definitely lots of models of reflection, and there are many different ways, to put together PowerPoint, throw some music in, maybe do some interpretive dance. I've never had interpretive dance, but I have had them do other kinds of things besides writing. And so it's really good to offer many models. And then I think one of the really important things to think about is what are your goals as an instructor, and also what Lisa and Maggie were just talking about, what are the goals of the students? To the extent that you can know them, but those are really important things to be thinking about. And some of these have already been referenced. These are all, the info is in the bibliography in the drive. I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on them, but there's like 5 models that are often cited, but there are of course many more. This one is the one that comes from Dewey. It's kind of older, and to me it's based on common sense. You do something, then you observe and reflect on it, and then you go out and try something else out again, and then you test it, and then you do the same thing over. So, and to the extent that I think if we develop critical thinkers, that's what we want them to be able to do, is to facilitate their own thinking and their own ways of making sense of the experience. And of course, we come in with helping them form the abstract concepts and perhaps think about ways we can link it to the course material. Maybe, Dr. Logan, one of our sociologists, likes for them to have like experience in grant writing. Well, then grant writing can be a great help to a partner agency. And it's a great skill to have. And then if you get the grant, it's a great thing to put on your resume. So this one is probably less well known. but I like it. It's from Duncan in the, Duncan and Kincaid. But this one says you think about what you're gonna do before you ever go out there. And so sometimes I think that we don't do that with our students. Have them think about it, then do it, reflect on it, and then the now what that Wendy mentioned is the what am I going to do with this? What are my commitments? And so on. This is the deal model that Kyle mentioned. There's a lot of articulation, different ones of that, but deal is describe, examine, articulate learning. So describe what you did, examine, and here are 3 categories: personal growth, civic learning, academic enhancement. Then figure out, can you say what you learned to someone else? Can you put it in a portfolio? And so on. And this one, I know that UNO has used, and I love the way you say it, I party. So I party. And then this one puts in a lot of reflection everywhere with the curriculum, the action that you prepare, and then you are able, in the terms of articulate learning, it's demonstrate. Can you demonstrate what you learned? You see the similarities between these? They're all, having you think, and do, and then reflect, and then do, and then reflect. This one is a little bit different. This is from Mitchell, and she's kind of critical, she's a lot critical of the traditional service learning model, where we really just take into account sort of the classroom, the student, and the community partner, and we're thinking about all the ways we can help each other and learn from it and so on. But she's saying, okay, well, no, we really need to go deeper than that, and we need to think about, in her case, a social change model. So, I've partnered off and on with our local homeless shelter, Crossroads, for a long time. Crossroads is expanding. They started with one here in Hastings. Now they have a homeless shelter in Kearney, and they most recently opened a homeless shelter in Grand Island. So rather than solving the problem of homelessness, they are providing a lot of needed services, but we're not actually tackling the bigger question about why this is happening. And so she would be arguing that that's something that we need to be really thinking about as we are tackling these kinds of questions in our classes. However, I do agree with her. I just got tired reading all the things that she was saying you needed to take into account. But I do agree that we sometimes put Band-Aids on silicone things, and our students can see that too. So I give her a lot of kudos. So those are 5 models. There are more out there, but these are all good, and you can share them with your students if you want to, so that they know what you're aiming for. So all of them stress that you need to have continuous reflection, that you all parties, including the community partner, assess their motivations and their commitments, their goals throughout the process. And then, of course, Mitchell adds in the social change piece. And she would argue that we need to redistribute power and really develop authentic relationships over time. Okay, and then
through the chair, just really quickly, this was another model that we use at UNO, primarily because I mentioned earlier about the K-12 connections that we have. It works still with higher ed faculty, and it's a well-researched model. Reflection, is one of the there's 7 or 8 quality service learning standards
Yes.
that kind of take you through that I-party cycle that we kind of overlay, because faculty members, when you're designing a syllabus, it's really helpful to have really concrete things. And they also have rubrics that go with them, so that the faculty member can say, I'm at a 4 on this rubric, and I have all of these pieces in here. And so if you're ever interested, the NYLC quality service learning standards are easily translatable. And so then you can see here the reflection, these are the indicators within the reflection component. Just to underline a couple things that we've already mentioned, the reflection occurs before, during, and after. So getting that understanding, right, like before you even do anything, what do you know about this? What don't you know about this? What are your preconceived experiences? What are your stereotypes? Those kinds of things. What are you expecting? What are you not expecting ahead of time? I think that's probably one of the most important things we're always talking about with our faculty. I also want to underline when we are training our faculty at UNO especially, we're always thinking about reflection and just like what Jean just mentioned, and evaluation in the same hand, even though they're two different kind of points on the circle. They if you don't tell students where you're going, and things like rubrics are really helpful for them, so that if you are having students reflect on something, it doesn't matter if they're doing it in whatever medium or whatever, if they're writing or using another kinesthetic strategy, you might be able to having that rubric there is very clear for them. Are you able to take your experience and integrate the theories that you're reading about in your class? How did you see a theory play out today, and in what way? Were your experiences validated by what we read today, or were they not validated? So those are things that that we would talk about. I underline what Jean was saying. And then this is that what, so what, now what framework that Wendy was mentioning as well earlier. So this is just another tool that we use that helps to guide some of our practice.
All right, well, this is sort of saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Just do, before, during, and after. Try to, I know that Stephanie Furr, you've done a lot with the aging population and adolescent development, and so you're actually having people applying the theories from the psychology stuff they're learning to what they're doing and coming back and reflecting on it. And I think that that's crucial in achieving your learning goals, no matter which, whatever discipline you're in, to do that. Another thing that a lot of the literature says, and I have seen this too, you need to provide some emotional support to students, because something that they're doing may trigger from their past, or from what if this happened to me, those kinds of things. And the more you do this, the more likely you are to see those kinds of responses, and to just need to be prepared for them. One of the things I used to do was a long time ago, when I was first doing service learning, I allowed the students to kind of it was almost more like a journal diary kind of thing that they did over on a January term experience. And then I would tell them to go through and black out or put something over whatever they didn't want me to read, because sometimes they would write things that were so personal that they really didn't want the instructor to read. Now I tell them to put that someplace else. Or if they want me to read it, I'm definitely happy to read it, but to give them the option. So these are some guidelines. I'm actually probably not going to read through them. There's different sets of guidelines. They're all saying the same things that we just talked about. Clearly link it. Be structured. I think sometimes you want freedom, and sometimes you want structure. And when I've done an intensive service learning course, like taking students for 3 weeks to Guatemala, for example, I offered them different prompts and then said, and you can choose on a couple of days to just write whatever you want to. So giving them that freedom of choice, but also structure at the same time. I'm not sure I agree with, but it's widely cited, that you need to have 15 to 20 hours of community service for it to really start making a difference. I do see that more time on a project generally does give better feedback. But I don't think you have to do this in every class, because if I said that then some people would never ever try it. What do you think?
I might add one thing on that. When I talk about thinking about reflection, I talk about the learning as your learning outcome for that course is the North Star. And our teacher at folks will maybe have some good ideas on this too, but that's your North Star. And it doesn't matter where that is, right? It can be a really high level goal, right? It could be a really high level academic goal, learning goal, or something else. Or it could be kind of really transactional, like you need to know that, I don't know, that this is how a proper sentence structure. Okay. But either way, the service experiences, when you're thinking about getting to that goal, must scaffold within up to that experience, that learning. And so however many experiences it takes to get to that is the number, the duration, what we call the duration and intensity of your project. So that duration can be a unit, and it might not take as much experience to get to that North Star for one learning outcome, but for another one it might take an entire semester. It might take an entire year, but another one might take 3. And the other thing I would add about this is the hours of service, and sometimes I think that folks can consider the out of classroom time and maybe not direct service time. It'll also be like the reading that you're doing, connecting as well. So sometimes that indirect direct can get a little blurry in some of this research.
Right, because I'm not sure how many know, but people typically divide service learning these days into like 4 different categories. Direct service, when you're out there actually working with someone in a population. Indirect, you're working on the benefits for the population, but you're not actually interacting with someone from the population. Then there's advocacy. You're out there saying, hey, we need more of this and here's why. And then there's the research-based. And so and by the time you get to the research-based, a lot of what you're doing is not necessarily going to be direct service or contact hours with people. All right. I thought this is just basically the but they actually did a study and said that the degree of integration of academic course content with the service experience were significant in terms of the course outcome. All right, I'm going to skip a couple of these things. I'll just go to some, I'm looking at time, a couple of things from teaching here. I will say that I have seen, and it doesn't necessarily mean, I probably should change this, it's not more time in the service placement, but more time in the project, however way you want to do it. I do see sort of, for me, better outcomes in terms of linking it to the course. But then I think I probably have these larger goals, my North Star. And so I am doing a smaller project right now, and I'm kind of wrestling with it because I'm doing it in a religion class, and I was stretching to try and come up with a service learning project I could do in world religions, because I really can't take them to a Buddhist temple every day. So I decided to work on the golden rule, because most traditions have some version of the golden rule: do unto others as you would want them to do unto you. And so I started them by going to Crossroads. They did a tour, which is our local homeless mission, and then they cooked there. And then they're choosing their second project. So, and what I saw, I gave them this assignment, which I know does not yield the deepest reflection, but it is a start. So the start is, and it helps, particularly with freshmen, to separate things out. So instead of getting the everything, you say, okay, tell me what you did, the tell me how it tied in with you. And then try and get it to the course themes. Guess which one is the hardest for them? Course themes. It's nearly always the hardest. And if I don't prompt, like I prompted with the golden rule, but I didn't give them a lot. And so here's the journal response where the guy is, this is the young man, talking about golden rule, and he says, treat others the way you want to be treated. So if everyone helped or took a little time out of their day to help others, the world would be a better place. Okay. Then he goes on to say there are several societal issues that impact hunger and homelessness. So, but I haven't gone over those in my class because we're actually focusing on the religious side. But when we took the tour, they were talking about some of that. And so, you know, this is a start. It doesn't have the depth that I would want, but I probably can't get tremendous depth from this prompt, right? I can get them started. If I gave them a more concrete question about exactly how we're going to tie it into the course themes, I would get a much better answer, right? But it's a start to separate because a lot of times the students conflate all these things together and they aren't necessarily able to separate them out. So I also teach, this is a lesson learned, 50 hours of community engagement in a sociology class. I don't know how I'm going to do it when I teach it in the block. But the students chose their placement. They negotiate a service learning covenant with whichever agency they're going to be working with. And then I give them many, many different kinds of prompts. And they have to do a final paper, which is an extension of the what, now what, so what. And I will share just a little bit. Well, I think choice is important, but and here's, not going to read that one, but this one, this is from what is called end reflections. And this student, and I think was very brave of her, she went to work with children and she goes, I don't like children. so she was working at her after school program and said, over the course of the semester, I slowly became more comfortable. And she was challenging herself to do that, and I encourage students to do that. And then I kind of liked, this student has come to a lot of the sociological and community change sorts of things that we hope some of our students come to. She says, in Hastings, we don't take care of our own. I've seen this firsthand at the Zone program. These kids are stuck in bad situations and there isn't being much done to help them get out of that situation. Some of them have problems with food security, others with absent parents. In fact, most community members blame the parents for the situation they are in. They see child care as an individual's responsibility, not the duty of the community. This is holding Hastings back economically and socially. So that's a lot of analysis packed into that, and a lot of critique and a lot of thinking. So hopefully each student gets to something like that at the end of their time with doing, because otherwise why put 50 hours in? Why do that? Okay, watching time. I do think that the service learning trips I've taken have been good. I haven't taken one since 2013 because I had funding for them before that. But there are problems with that, and I really wrestle. There's a justice problem. If a student is going to a developing country and they're spending all this money to get there, and if you just gave the money for one plane ticket to the agency and they could do everything that the students did on their trip, should we send them? And my 2 cents has always come down that only if you're going to really work on the transformative side of it. Otherwise, you probably shouldn't be doing it. But that is, to me, a real justice issue. And then, so that's something that we probably think about in all of our classes, for sure. worked with, we did medical anthropology, and we worked with children who were either had AIDS or HIV positive. And so that was transformative in a lot of different ways, but one of the biggest things that came out of that for me was these healthcare professionals, when they saw a universal healthcare system, they all came back and they said, a universal healthcare system in a developing country is better for the poor there than our system is here for the poor. But our system is better for the rich. And for people going into a healthcare field, I think that's a good set of knowledge to take away. And then finally, I'll just talk about, Jessica left, but she had us start a project last year. And this is something I've really been thinking about, is how do you do service learning over several courses and over the course of a year. So we did a book project and a museum project where the students did oral histories. We had 3 classes during oral histories. Then we had a book publication class that edited the oral histories and put them together. This was a Faces of Hastings Diversity initiative. And then in the spring, we had someone do a museum exhibit based on that. And Pedro's Spanish class translated the English into Spanish for the museum exhibit. So, and she's going to continue this project this year. So this is the book cover, and I will end with that. So we had like 25 different, we tried to do diversity, not the way some people might think of it, but we did religious diversity, ethnic diversity, social class diversity, age, and disability. So we had stories from this whole wide spectrum of folks. So we'll take questions, but it's right at 3. So I skipped some stuff when we got here at 3. I don't like to keep people over. So.
And also in the drive.
Yes, this is in the Google Drive, yeah. Yeah, so thoughts, questions? Ready to get back on the road? You folks got 3 hours, we're close. 2.5? I could make it from here driving 80 to the interstate 426 where Eugene Mahoney is. I can't get it, that's driving 80. So, on a good day, right.
So what's next after today? What?
Now what?
Now what?
Oh, yeah.
Which piece to the now what? For the compact or for our institutions?
More generally, like the compact.
Well, the compact, I think, has 12 institutions now that have signed up. And we'd like to get to at least 20. So if we could get some more, that would be good. It's a 3-state area. Did you folks, have you joined? You have. How about Peru? Yep. I know UNO, UNL, but not yet UNK. There's some schools in South Dakota and some schools in Kansas that have joined. And Mary Ryan, the Campus Compact Director, wanted more ideas for what kinds of training that you might like, or what more things. I've been pushing for some grant monies to help us do things, which I think would be great, but we sort of need to grow the compact so that we have more resources. And the Campus Compact website is a great place to go for resources, particularly those of you who are teaching. I love it. I go and check and see who else has a syllabus that's similar to a course I want to teach and get ideas from it. And they have reflection, ideas, research, assessment, Julie, you wanna add anything?
I think we would, definitely take any ideas back to Mary, and, so that folks can participate and maybe scaffold and create other things for the region. But, we are a little bit ahead of this. The campus compact used to be a state-by-state situation, and, Nebraska and, like Jean mentioned, South Dakota and Kansas are becoming more regional. So, that's kind of, it's a larger area, of folks to support, but it's certainly a great resource. Also, another thing that's coming up is the National Campus Compact Conference in Seattle.
That'll
That's
be in
always a
March.
good opportunity in March too.
Yeah, it's a great conference to go to find out what other schools are doing and what campus compact initiatives are. The compact has really thrown a lot of effort into their civic engagement this past year, and given the status of what's happening in our political world, throwing some resources towards civic engagement is probably a really good idea.
Yeah.
And we used to have we'll have a regional compact
Next year,
in 2021.
probably in St. Louis.
Okay.
So if you have ideas, please don't hesitate to let us know. And then maybe we'll try to make sure that the participant list is in the Google Drive too, just so that this group of folks has access to each other as well. And there's been really great ideas shared across.
Right, and then I think maybe you can email me probably, or Mary Ryan, if you have like a really good tool or resource, then we can add those there, because I learned so much from other people's ideas about what really worked, that it's really, that would be very helpful, and then we can all see that. Okay.